The Rings of Power, Episode 5. King Gil-galad entertained Durin at a dinner to celebrate the union of the elves and the dwarves, but it was a very fake and fragile union built on lies. Durin's father did not trust the elves, and it turns out he was right. The elves had a secret agenda that Elrond did not know about. King Gil-galad and Celebrimbor suspected that the dwarves had found a new ore, and they believed that that new ore is necessary to save the elven race. Here is why. Elves are immortal, but there is a growing problem. There is a blight growing on their tree. That blight is an outer manifestation of an inner reality. The reality is that the light of the Eldar is fading. In other words, the light of the elves is fading. Gil-galad believes that the elves need Mithril to survive. He believes this because Mithril appears to have the light of the lost Silmaril inside of it. So what does that mean? In a prior episode, Celebrimbor showed Elrond a hammer. It was the Hammer of Fëanor, who forged 3 gems known as the Silmarils. The Silmarils contained some of the light of the 2 trees, so they were beautiful and powerful. Sauron's boss named Morgoth destroyed the 2 trees and he stole the Silmarils. That is actually one of the main reasons why some of the elves declared war against him. Those wars happened in the First Age. At the end of the First Age, Sauron's boss was defeated. This show is taking place in the Second Age. The point is, the Silmarils were gems that contained the light of the 2 trees of Valinor. Since Morgoth destroyed the 2 trees of Valinor, the Silmarils were all that was left of its light. In other words, they were very, very important. In the show adaptation, Gil-galad reminded Elrond of an obscure legend, the Song of the Roots of the Hithoglir. That legend speaks of a battle high among the peaks of the Misty Mountains. As a reminder, Durin's home is in the Misty Mountains. The legendary battle was not over honor or duty, but over a tree. Some claimed that that tree was hiding the last of the lost Silmarils. According to that legend, an elven warrior with a heart as pure as Manwë poured all of his light into the tree to protect it. Meanwhile, a Balrog of Morgoth channeled all his hatred into the tree to destroy it. Amidst their duel unending, lightning ensnared the tree, forging a power of both good and evil. That power seeped down the roots into the mountain depths, and now the dwarves have found it. That power is the new ore called Mithril. As a reminder, Elrond had told Durin that the Mithril looked almost lit from within. That was an early clue that the Mithril was similar to the 2 trees of Valinor, other magical trees, as well as the Silmarils. Long story short, Elrond told Durin the truth, that he hadn't known it at the time, but the elves had secretly wanted him to find out whether or not the dwarves had found Mithril. He told Durin that the light of the Eldar was fading, that they needed Mithril or else their immortal souls would dwindle into nothing, slowly diminishing until they were but shadows, swept away by the tides of time, forever. That is a wordy sentence. I think what he was trying to say is that they needed the Mithril or else they would lose their immortality. The elves do have another option. If they don't get the Mithril, they could leave the lands by spring, which would mean sailing off to Valinor. But if they do that, then they won't be around to help fight against any future evil such as Sauron. Long story short, in order for the elves to stay on Middle-earth and keep their immortality, they need Mithril since it has some sort of power inside of it.
So the fate of the entire elven race is in my hands.
However, there are 2 potential problems. First off, Durin is just a prince, so it's not really his decision to make. And his father has already shut off the operations since mining Mithril is dangerous. The second potential problem is that the power inside Mithril was a combined power of both good and evil. So let's keep that on our radar. Over in Rhovanion, Nori gave the stranger some speaking lessons and then they began a migration to the grove. Meanwhile, 3 people found the spot where the stranger had landed. The one on the left was wearing armor, the one in the middle had a staff, and the one on the right had some sort of plate. There is a design on one side of it that looks like a constellation, so this plate thing might actually be some sort of map used to locate this spot and maybe others. This may not be true, but the way it was filmed made it seem as if the one in the middle teleported down below. The one down below looked at the stranger's footprint and then looked up all creepy. Presumably, they're going to track down the stranger. The big question is, are they friends or foes? I would bet on the latter. They seem like obvious villains, whereas the stranger seems like a good guy. After all, he saved Nori's life from the wolves. But then things got weird. The magic that he used appears to have come at a cost, and that cost was reflected on the arm that he had slammed down onto the ground. Nori touched him while he was doing some sort of healing magic, and it eventually threw her back. She ran off very scared, and then the stranger made a strange face. Up until this point, I had assumed that the stranger was Gandalf, but the face that he made has me wondering if he is someone else. To play devil's advocate, Earlier in the episode, Nori had listed a few types of perils, including big folk. When the stranger thought about how he had killed some fireflies, he began to worry that he himself was a peril. Nori reassured him that he is good and he is here to help, and I tend to agree. I still think that he's going to eventually be revealed to be Gandalf, despite the creepy look that he had at the end of his final scene in this episode. It's also worth noting that the Harfoots traveled south down the Anduin River, and it appears that they have gotten pretty close to the Southlands, so their subplot may converge with other subplots such as the Watchtower. Bronwyn and Arondir told everyone about Adar and his ultimatum, how he wanted them to abandon the tower and swear fealty to him. Bronwyn asked who would stay and fight, and a bunch of people raised their hands, but Waldreg put forth a counter-argument. Waldreg said that if they stayed, they would die, that it would be better to take their chances by bowing to the supposed enemy. He also pointed out that their ancestors had done just that. In the end, Waldreg convinced half the people to join him, including Theo's friend Rowan. But Waldreg was unable to convince Theo to leave, and that was important since Theo has the Sauron sword. Arondir had a one-on-one with Theo in the practice shard, and they had a great conversation. Like many Southlanders, Theo had never liked Arondir. But Arondir had saved Theo's life. On top of that, Arondir was now choosing to stay there and risk his own immortal life to protect them. Humans. Southlanders. When Theo asked him why he was staying, Arondir said that he had come to know the people there, implying that they were worth fighting for. Then we got the best line of the episode.
Half of us just left.
But half stayed. Including you.
We already realized that Arondir was awesome, and now Theo realizes it as well. As a result, Theo showed him the strange sword hilt, and he recognized it. As a reminder, Arondir has been stationed at that watchtower for 79 years. Nowadays, there are vines over some of the walls, but Arondir remembered what was behind those vines. There was a sculpture that looked like the sword hilt. That suggests that this tower might have been built by and for men who were on the side of Sauron and his boss Morgoth. Arondir showed Bronwyn the hilt and told her that it is a key that was used in the past to enslave her ancestors somehow. Unfortunately, Arondir doesn't know what Adar wants to do specifically. All he knows is that Adar mentioned becoming a god. We as viewers got a little more information from this scene here. The orc did not like the sunlight because it burned his skin. On the other hand, Adar is able to stand out in the sunlight, and a part of him likes it. However, he doesn't expect the sunlight to last much longer. Adar told the orc that the sunlight will be gone soon, and with it, the part of him that knew its warmth as well. So that is our second clue. Adar wants to be a god, and he expects to change. We also know that Adar wants the hilt to the sword, so he might intend to use that sword to enact the change that makes him a god. In episode 1, Galadriel mentioned dark arts in the unseen world. This might also be related to Adar's goal. One idea is that Adar is planning to sacrifice his own body as a vessel for Sauron. That is an option, but there was a clue that Adar might not be aligned with Sauron. When Waldreg got to Adar, he bent the knee and pledged his fealty to Sauron. Since this angered Adar, it might be a clue that Adar does not work for Sauron. Either way, Waldreg said that he would bend the knee to Adar, and here's where it got interesting. Adar told Waldreg to kill Rowan in order to prove his loyalty, but we didn't see him do it. I'm hoping that Waldreg chose to kill himself instead of Rowan. If so, that would mean that Waldreg was a human who chose to side with the darkness, but in the end, he acted based off of a little bit of light that he found inside of him. A last little bit of light similar to the little bit of light left in the Lindon tree. The last little bit of light still left in a world that is darkening. This is also a nod to the concept of hope that King Gil-galad spoke about.
Hope is never mere, Elrond, even when it is meager.
So here's to hoping that Waldreg leveraged that last little bit of light inside of him to kill himself instead of Rowan. Something similar happened to Bronwyn. When Arondir told Bronwyn about the sword, she almost gave up and bowed down to the enemy. Arondir spoke to her, and she rekindled the last little bit of hope that she had left inside of her. As she did that, they heard a sound. Adar and his forces were on the march, which meant they were soon in for a fight. Thankfully, they might get some help from Galadriel and co. Over on the island of Numenor, Elendil rejected Isildur from joining the expedition to Middle-earth. His father promoted his best friend to lieutenant, and he apologized to his best friend for their prior fight. But Valinor still wouldn't accept Isildur onto his team. Meanwhile, there was some unrest in the city. Some of the anti-elf faction was angry, so Iarion convinced Kemen to speak to his father. Kemen tried to get Pharazôn to postpone the journey to Middle-earth, but it didn't work. Pharazôn wants to plant Halbrand as a king who will be in Numenor's debt. Pharazôn plans on augmenting their wealth by extracting resources from Middle-earth. So Kemen came up with another plan. He snuck onto one of the boats to burn it down, and that's when he ran into Isildur. They got into a little scuffle and the boat blew up. Isildur saved Kemen's life, and Isildur covered for Kemen, so Kemen covered for Isildur. Long story short, Isildur looked like a hero. As a result, his father finally allowed him to join the expedition to Middle-earth, albeit in a very low position for the time being. Isildur was assigned to sweep the stables. The silver lining is that the horsemaster had recruited Isildur's favorite horse, a horse named Beric, so now they will be together. Halbrand told Galadriel that he had done bad things to survive the Southlands, though he left out the specifics and she didn't press him for any details. In the end, despite many warnings that he has given her about himself, Galadriel still trusted Halbrand, so she convinced him to help petition the court to let them go. And it worked. It's worth noting that Tar Palantir had warned Miriel to not go, since all that awaits her there is darkness. In the past, Halbrand's ancestors fought for the side of Morgoth, but this time, Halbrand is going to fight for the light. At least, for now.